Dr. Ho Chiew-Ping and dear participants, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to our very special webinar on Southeast Asian response to major power in the Indo-Pacific framework. Nepal Institute for International Cooperation Engagement is an independent, apolitical, and non-partisan think tank which believes in freedom, democracy, and world free from conflict. We envision a world where sources of insecurity are identified and understood, conflicts are prevented or resolved, and peace is advocated. To talk on a very interesting topic of today, we have a very distinguished scholar, Dr. Ho Chiew-Ping. Dr. Ho Chiew-Ping is a senior lecturer in strategic studies and international relations at the National University of Malaysia. She is concurrently a member of the Consultative Council on Foreign Policy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Malaysia, Adjunct Lecturer at the Malaysian Armed Force Defense College, and the Institute of Diplomacy and Foreign Relations of Malaysia. She was previously Council Fellow, Global Future Council on the Korean Peninsula at the World Economic Forum until September 2021, Korean Foundation Fellow at the Institute of Strategic and International Studies of Malaysia from 2019 to 2020, a Shangri-La Dialogue Southeast Asian Young Scholar Program, Associate Research Fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies in Singapore, Academy of Korean Studies, Research Fellow in 2011, and Korean Foundation Field Research Fellow at Seoul National University in 2010. While her main research focus is on the Korean Peninsula security, she also worked on the security and economic linkages between Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia, Southeast Asia and smaller states' response to power and security issues, and external powers influence, such as US, China, Japan, Korea, Australia, and Southeast Asia. Dr. Ho received her PhD in Politics and International Relations from Trobe University, Australia. Dr. Ho, once again, welcome to our program. Kindly make your remarks in 20-25, maximum 30 minutes, which will be followed by question and answers. The program is streaming live on Facebook and several other platforms. We'd like to request all our participants to drop their questions on Zoom chat or under Facebook Live. You can also tweet or WhatsApp if you like. Dr. Ho, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, for inviting me to this very great platform to talk about Southeast Asia and the major powers. So as we are now in the era of the transiting global power order, so with the intensifying United States and China rivalry in the region, so as we have just chatted moments before the beginning of this webinar, so we look at different regions around the world, and we are all facing similar situations where the great powers such as United States and China are creating the conditions where smaller powers are unable seemingly to decide their own fate and have to yield of their autonomy and also agency to the greater powers. But is that true? So looking at Southeast Asia, I think we all agree that as a group of smaller countries, independently, we are each small powers on its own right. But collectively, we have one of the world's second most efficient regional organization after European Union. Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, has been able to hold its own right and be able to introduce terms, concepts like ASEAN centrality, regional unity, and we have loudly proclaimed that we don't choose sides, and by arguing for our own place in our own region, which is now pivotal to the world great powers, we try to assert our autonomy amidst the many layers of competitions and also exchanges. So the geographical location of Southeast Asia is not as complicated as the other region that you may imagine it to be. So we are just right at the southern hemisphere of East Asia, and where a group or country is neatly located right next to South Asia, namely India, Bangladesh and Nepal, and just right under China. So this earned our nickname as East of India, South of China. So with this region have long been prevailed over this a region that is surrounded by great giants that are also known as great power. And in the Southern Pacific, there is Australia. So how are we going to claim our place? Do we play a role in the balance of power? And how do we assess our national power? By looking at our resources, we are not on par with the other middle powers, such as Australia or even South Korea. So South Korea relatively is a small power in Northeast Asia. However, it has earned its position as a great power on the world stage due to its increasingly popular soft power culture and also its gaining momentum in economic strength. Structurally, the world is now under a challenging order with the United States as the hegemonic power, especially in terms of military. Its military might is still unmatched by any other powers, including China, and China's modernization in its military capability has yielded the much anticipated discussion about whether the rise of great power challenging another hegemon would result in a war. And this is why the popular paradigm right now is to talk about the Thucydides trap by Professor Graham Allison of Harvard University. And there are many other IR scholars are now claiming that a conflict is already in place and impending war is inevitable. But is that true? So given the parity in power, so in Southeast Asia, we witness a form of asymmetry. And amidst this condition of strategic asymmetry, each of the smaller countries and including smaller middle powers, or colloquially known as the weaker powers, as characterized by my very good colleague, Professor Kwik Cheng Chui. So the agency and autonomy of the smaller states become the much discussed context. So according to Pew Research Center's opinion poll, among the North America, European, Northeast Asia, Middle East, and Latin America countries, increasingly more and more countries recognize that China is becoming the world's leading economic power. And what does this mean for the United States with its military spending of more than $685 billion, while China is only spending about 1/6 or 1/7 of that total spending. So in terms of the structure of the power, we are now not only seeing geopolitical competition, rivalry, military competition, geo-economic competition as well. So resulting in what was known as the trade conflict between US and China, especially in 2019. And now even in the technology realm, we are witnessing the US-China strategic rivalry spilling over in that area as well. So how do we, every country, maximize their power? So the most popular framework to understand this is the balance of power, where you're going against the greater power, or bandwagoning, you choose to cooperate closely with the great powers. So in between the two options, there were indirect or underbalancing or limited bandwagoning. So as my great mentor, Professor Kwik, would characterize that as a behavior of hedging. So in terms of strategies, we adopt varying degrees of keeping a distance or engaging, getting closer to the said great powers. So this balancing act can be done out of fear, which is balance of threats, or out of national interest, balance of interest, or the good old balance of power. So ASEAN, there are 10 of them. So I would like to name them as Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Singapore, Laos, Indonesia, Myanmar, Malaysia, Brunei, and Philippines. So how all these 10 countries work together under one banner of ASEAN, and despite their very different in their government system, political beliefs, and also economy, trade. So the structure is inherently different. And how did we ever come together and form a kind of a unity? So we would like to call this the ASEAN miracle. So we unite despite the diversity. So since founded in 1967, the founding 5 countries of ASEAN has been working together. We admit new membership is not without controversy, such as Cambodia, Vietnam, and also Myanmar's ASEAN membership was debated throughout the admission. And we believe that we can socialize the outliers. So Vietnam is the only communist country in ASEAN region, and they have become one of the forerunners in terms of expressing the importance of ASEAN since the joining, because it is because of ASEAN that allows Vietnam to join in the international community, much like when United States invited China to join the World Trade Organization in 2001. So by socializing what we know as the very different actor or partner, we in fact bring them into the world stage. So currently the debate in the United States is such that the threat perception exaggerating the threat permeated by the sheer might of China's Belt and Road strategy, its economic dominance, and political influence over the nearest regions, especially. So ASEAN recounted our history as the one that open to all nations, including North and South Vietnam. And aside from the founding members, other nations were still embroiled in civil wars. And yet we are able now to stand as one community, and that is a very hard-earned result. So what does regionalism means to ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific power rivalry right now? We have since introduced in the early 90s ASEAN-led platforms and mechanisms. So we now have the political security regionalization. Not many people realize that ASEAN was born out of concerns over the security threats in the region. So that is also the founding reason for ASEAN Regional Forum, of which greater powers and in the extended area like Russia, India, China, and also Australia, New Zealand are part of, and even North Korea. So it remains the only regional organization where DPRK found its membership. So setting up functional working relations among the dialogue partners via ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting plus various security-related working groups such as humanitarian disasters, cybersecurity, and now the maritime domain as well. So there is an ongoing Code of Conduct COC negotiation with China on the South China Sea. And we also embedded various free trade agreements, such as the recently concluded RCEP to be entered into power in early next year, January 2022. And we try to bring together the West and the non-West, the South, and across the political, economic, and social cultural domains. So all of this, what we call as the ASEAN Way, is this the way forward in the era of Indo-Pacific? We have since responded by introducing ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, and France, Germany, and EU now has their own version of Indo-Pacific strategy or policy guidelines. So amidst these many layers of alignments and also pivoting to Asia in the form of Indo-Pacific framework, ASEAN is still coming under fire. We were being questioned, we were being criticized for been diverse internally, shaky united front, mainly rhetoric. So ASEAN as a talk shop is our favorite inside joke, for instance. So what were known as the shortcomings are exactly our strengths. We are able to reconcile differences, non-interference principles of enable member countries and dialogue partners, setting aside their political differences and proceed with negotiation, emphasizing cooperative outcomes rather than confrontation. So Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong has in many ways, in speech and in his foreign affairs article, again and again emphasized that confrontation will not lead to peace and prosperity, stability that we much treasure. And now, especially under the post-pandemic condition, there is a greater need for us to diffuse and de-escalate tension and to enable even more members to participate and allow to participate in multilateral framework. Under the pandemic, each of the country has been working in silo, individually, and even form a form of a minilateralism. So there is now another aspect of the debates pointing towards the incoming trend of minilateralism. ASEAN used to be very sensitive about being an ASEAN minus X, meaning minus one of the members and proceed with the rest. But right now, given what is happening in Myanmar, so the military coup has taken away the democratization underway, and that its people are against authoritarianism, and ASEAN is at odds on how to going forward with this scenario. So not only ASEAN minus X, but internally trilateralism, quadrilateralism has been underway. And we found that in that form of cooperation, the gains or the benefits are truly maximized. So that may be another layer of way forward amidst the strategic uncertainties that we are experiencing right now. And I would like to keep my remarks short, and I look forward to the questions and discussion that we are going to have from now on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hu. Thank you so much for the interesting lecture. It was really enlightening presentation and we learned a lot. We have received lots of questions. I can see around 12, but I think now in next 5 to 10 minutes, we'll be getting lots of those questions. So without wasting any time, let me start with the questions. Like first is, how have American partners in East Asia reached to AUKUS, Southeast Asia basically? What does the new AUKUS alliance means for Southeast Asia? That is one. Second is, I'm trying to clear a few questions on Indo-Pacific. How would you explain the future of Indo-Pacific from Southeast Asian perspective? And since you come from Malaysia, what is Malaysian stand on Indo-Pacific strategy? These are the 3 questions for you in the first round. Please unmute yourself. You are on mute.
Sorry, and thank you so much for those very interesting questions. Firstly, I would like to address the question about Malaysia and Southeast Asia's position on Indo-Pacific. So we understand that by extending Asia-Pacific to Indo-Pacific, that effectively includes India. So India is no longer a bystander, but an active member of the current Indo-Pacific framework. And that also corresponds to India's Act East, from Look East to Act East policy, and the need to cater to the Quad alignment among United States, Japan, Australia, and India. So under this emerging framework, Malaysia initially has resistance towards adopting Indo-Pacific. So we retain the use of Asia-Pacific in our defense white paper launched in 2019. So it was until very recently that we started to recognize that Indo-Pacific has become a reality, even over the course of pandemic. And Southeast Asia has, together we launched ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, again, emphasizing cooperation rather than confrontation. And we wish that most of the major powers respect the position of ASEAN and the Southeast Asian nations to to not to yield such pressure of China's sphere and also US sphere of cooperation. We welcome everyone, and ASEAN platform is supposed to be inclusive and not exclusive. So that is our basic groundwork. And the other questions about AUKUS, so the Australia, UK, and US trade pact. So I have participated in some of those AUKUS panels organized by the Australians themselves. So at the moment, they are still debating whether there are more merits than the shortcomings coming off from this arrangement. So it is a very traditional security focused kind of arrangement, and proponent or the supporters of AUKUS argue that it is a form of technological partnership. So, and that inevitably would bring us to the questions of, so how about France? France is supposed to be an Indo-Pacific player, and by abandoning France, is Australia still a trustable partner, especially also to the Southeast Asian nations? Indonesia is the greatest critic of AUKUS because they are just located right above Australia. So they are concerned about Australia's decision over whether this means there is a higher threat perceptions towards the immediate regional conflict and disputes. So the rest of the Southeast Asian countries are concerned about whether such nuclear powered submarine, if the first one may be delivered maybe 40 years later. So it is still a long plan in the making, but already everyone is very concerned and worried about the implications strategically, geopolitically, and in the already complicated maritime situation in Southeast Asia. We wish that there were not adding more layers of concerns to the already complicated issues involving China over the South China Sea. Let me know if I missed any questions.
Thank you. We'll get back to you. There is one very interesting question by one scholar from Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, New Delhi. He's asking, do you believe unilateral formations and pacts like Quad and AUK-US are in ASEAN's long-term benefit? Do they really affect ASEAN centrality in some ways?
Okay, that's a really good question. So as I said just now, ASEAN in the early decades truly believed that unilateralism can harm ASEAN's interests. But right now, since we are trying to promote that inclusivity is much better and positive than exclusivity, so we don't mind those extra layers of unilateralism, as long as they don't contradict and trying to undermine ASEAN centrality.
Thank you. Let me move to the next question. Like Malaysia finds itself caught amidst South Korea, Japan trade wars and the sluggishness of the Eurozone economy, partly from the uncertainty surrounding Brexit. Will this have significant impacts on its positions on Sino-American trade war?
Okay, I think in terms of trade war, it is indeed more complicated. So trade, economy, the global supply chain, especially under the pandemic disruption. So one of the most prized production manufacturing item is the semiconductor. So some of the Japanese companies actually move out from China, and South Korean and Japan companies, likewise, they have opened up some new factories under new agreement with certain Southeast Asian countries. So as the supply chain has moved downwards to Southeast Asia countries, so we think that we do play a very important role in trying to converge those multiple interests. So United States is still looking at their closest partners, such as South Korea, Japan, and even Taiwan right now. So Taiwan itself is also overwhelmed by all of this demand, and actually call out to Malaysia, another semiconductor producing country, to step up our own game and to meet up to fill in the gap of the supply chain, for instance. So I don't think trade war is a reality. It is more like a technical conflict and disputes that can be resolved by our negotiation and also trade settlement dispute mechanism.
Thank you. What are the response of US and China in Southeast Asia during the pandemic in order to win the hearts and minds of the people? Was there any kind of competition in that region between US and China?
I think we do witness that over the vaccine diplomacy. So at the beginning of the pandemic outbreak, China is the first one to step forward to offer, in the beginning of the pandemic. So China suffers, and some of the Southeast Asian countries such as Malaysia, because we produce medical grade gloves and face masks. So we did provide those much needed medical supplies to China in the beginning. So when it was our turn to suffer from the outbreak, so China likewise reciprocate in kind. So it is because of this reciprocal action-reaction that gives the kind of an illusion about a competition over vaccine, medical supply with R&D and whatnot. But the reality is that Malaysia does not only receive Sinovac, CoronaVac, and all that. We receive a range of different types of vaccines. So like Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, including AstraZeneca. And the data so far shows that and proves that all vaccine works equally well. So, again, we become the we become the symbol of inclusivity, in which any solutions are good solutions, and we accept everything and everyone. So in that way, even though I believe that there is a form of competition between US and China themselves, but if the beneficiaries such as the Southeast Asian countries did not get any harm for it, so I see why not.
Thank you so much. We also have similar situation. We're accepting all kind of vaccines from all the countries. ASEAN has launched its outlook on the Indo-Pacific region in the recent past, which does not have a direct link to Malaysian foreign policy direction. How far do you think this strategy will reap advantages for Malaysia in particular, or Southeast Asia in general?
I'm not too sure what is the focus of this question, but let me try my best. I think at the moment, because of the changing government in Malaysia, so many people don't see the consistency and what is our foreign policy at the moment. And by the end of this year, we are supposed to launch the so-called foreign policy framework under the current government. So if nothing goes astray, I think our main focus right now is to achieve post-pandemic recovery, especially in economic realm. So politically, we really just don't care. And the public health infrastructure become ever more important. So countries that launch public health infrastructure initiative or diplomacy, such as South Korea's COVID-19 Build Back Better, and China's Health Silk Road that was launched right after Digital Silk Road was taken place over the course of pandemic. So all of these are very welcome. The United States under the Biden government recently just announced that there will be an economic component to their Indo-Pacific strategy. But yet again, we don't see where is the money and how it can be materialized. So until then, we will still kind of adopt a wait and see situation. So every country in Southeast Asia negotiated fervently for the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. I heard from my friends who were involved in the negotiation that Singapore was very insistent on some of the terms and words to be used in the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. So we have come to a compromise and also agreement on the document. So you can safely refer to the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific as the one that has been embraced by each of the Southeast Asian countries.
Thank you, Dr. Hu. You just mentioned about Silk Road. So what are the prospects and status of China's Belt and Road Initiative project in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I'm not the specialist working on Belt and Road initiatives, but some of the projects that I know has already completed before the pandemic. So, and thereby that led to some of the Chinese company to withdraw from the country and return to China. So in some aspects, it is still ongoing. So the agreement is there, so they need to be implemented. However, the progress might have been slowed down because of to control the cluster outbreak among the construction workers, and also the financial agreement implementation and realization are yet to be materialized, I believe. So, for instance, what has been promised to the Philippines, almost half has been materialized. So the other half would be awaiting for a better reopening to allow to be continued.
Dr. Hu, let me move away from China and the United States. Let's move to Russia. What is Russia's role in Southeast Asia?
So they maintain a very low profile presence. However, their think tank does engage with some of the Southeast Asian countries. So in Kuala Lumpur, we hosted the Valdai Discussion Club meeting, a kind of a Malaysia-Russia bilateral meeting. But yeah, so we have confirmed that the traditional trade and economy relations remain. So Russia, back in the time of still Soviet Union, used to be a very close partner to Vietnam, Indonesia, Myanmar, and to a certain extent, some other countries. But right now, the exchanges and trade are solely focusing on the mutual area of agreement. Russia very much wanted to be part of ASEAN-based platform because the other great powers are there, such as US, China, Japan, South Korea, India, and Australia. So Russia see no reason of excluding itself from the region, and it is why it is also one of the dialogue partner of ASEAN member states as well.
Thank you, Dr. Hu. Let me move to the next question. The European Union passed an act earlier this year to phase out palm oil for renewable fuels by 2030 due to deforestation concerns. Is President Mahathir's complaint of being bullied by powerful nations actually true?
I like this question. So the dilemma over the deforestation, the need for achieve sustainable development, is a form of capitalist system that impose some kind of unfair condition on the developing countries, because the developed countries has already exhausted their resources, and thereby they can now pursue clean environment, green technologies and whatnot. But most of the developing countries, especially in Southeast Asia, we are yet to achieve that kind of advancement, and we still rely on the abundance of resources that we have. And I remember there is one time when the counter argument that Malaysia made is, look at the palm leaves, they are still green, right? So, but of course we need to address whether our palm industry is sustainable. Malaysia is the only country that issues sustainable palm oil practice in the world. And that certification allowed it to be exported to other developed countries, including many of the vegetarian and also organic food production company that was used around the world. So I don't see the reason why we can play a part in ensuring a certain kind of sustainable practice that can enable us to pursue economic pragmatism while still trying to achieve the other sustainable development goals and also climate action.
Dr. Hu, we've got lots of questions on the role of China in both the regions for creating geopolitical rivalry, like what role does China play, how US is confronting. We've got maybe 7 or 8 questions around those. Second is, we have also got lots of questions on is there any kind of competition in terms of the infrastructure projects, because BRI has economic component, and you said that Indo-Pacific is also talking about bringing those components. So do you see those kind of competition in Southeast Asia where the two powers are trying to, influence the countries there? So there are many questions on that, BRI and other things. But one is very neutral question, that what is the role of China in Southeast Asia? Let's forget about rivalry, which you can mention. But what is the role of China in Southeast Asia? How important is China? And if they have to choose between China and the US, how difficult will it be for Southeast Asian countries? How do they not take sides? How easy it is for them to abstain, or you can say not take sides? There are lots of questions revolving around this, so I try to club those.
Okay, thank you so much. I can see how great a job you're doing at moderating the questions. So let me first respond to the infrastructure components. There are more than two offers that we made in terms of infrastructure investment. Japan is actually the longest infrastructure development aid donor country to Southeast Asia. So it is not difficult to see many of the Japanese brand shopping malls throughout Southeast Asia. Many of the construction projects were funded by Japan since at least the 70s, if not since the 60s. So all of this has provided Japan a concrete position in Southeast Asia, and thereby it is still a trustable and reliable partner for us to rely on, especially in the area of infrastructure development. China is a newcomer because it is still in the midst of developing itself throughout 90s and also 2000s. So when Xi Jinping launched the Belt and Road Initiative, it took 2 years for anything to be really materialized and the agreement signed between China and the Southeast Asian counterparts. So South Korea, with its heavy steel industries such as Hyundai and Samsung, so it's also a favorite among the Southeast Asians as well. So US with its General Motors and many other long-term investor companies having presence in Kuala Lumpur, Manila, and elsewhere also provided a lot of the infrastructure assistance already in this region. So of course, there seems to be only US and China, but the reality on the ground is not like that. Secondly, the role of China in Southeast Asia is not just to balance the United States. So they are welcome locally because of its, it is our closest neighbor, unlike the United States, which is on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. And also China understands Southeast Asian culture better than the other Western countries, including the European countries, except those who already understand very well of our background and historical and cultural dimension. So ASEAN is actually one of the first regional organizations that accept and also integrate China into the regional framework. So as we launched the ASEAN Dialogue Partner Initiative, China, Japan, South Korea are the first 3 Northeast Asian countries that become our dialogue partners. And it was on that foundation that those partnerships continue to grow until today and into the foreseeable future. So I would need maybe some more specific questions about the role of China in Southeast Asia to better illustrate other aspects of these relations, maybe perhaps on the South China Sea area.
Thank you so much. There's another question. I'll try to look at the other part, like how does Southeast Asian countries got benefited from Europe and Asia and United States in Asia Pacific?
So the focus is on Southeast Asia, right?
Yes.
All right. So Southeast Asia and Europe. So there is an Asia-Europe meeting, so that not many people know of. So there were exchanges and delegation were maintained every year. So perhaps it was under the Indo-Pacific framework that such exchanges would continue to increase. And over the course of pandemic, I actually was also being embedded in some of the think tank exchanges cross-regional wise. So the digital connectivity, like right now, so you don't have to pay for my flight ticket and whatnot. So it's easy for us to have conversation nowadays compared to before, and 24 hours and nonstop. So in a way, the exchanges has been enhanced due to the technological and digital connectivity. And this is the type of the next generation partnership and collaboration that will continue to expand among the countries.
Thank you, Dr. Hu. Dr. Hu, there's another question, like amid deepening tactical and strategic competition with China, the US wanted ASEAN to stand up to what it calls outside coercion into the regional bloc's own backyard. Even Trump blamed China for this. How do you look at it? How do ASEAN countries look at it?
Yeah, very interesting. So South China Sea, yeah, many people ask us, can you just change the name? But the reality is that it is a greater country and we have accepted that as a reality for a very long time. But nonetheless, we still hold on to our exclusive economic zone, the EEZ. And a lot of the Southeast Asian countries have trained their officials and many experts in the maritime and law of the sea to better defend ourselves against those incursions. So in that regard, I think taking Malaysia as example, we rely on our diplomatic relations. So whenever there is a huge China's vessels presence appear in our waters, then we will try to negotiate diplomatically. And when such incursion increased in frequency, then we started to send the protest note diplomatically. So I think we have been assertive enough to explain our agency and also our autonomy, and we will continue to defend our interests when it comes to those areas. But it doesn't hurt how we do business with China, and economic relations continue to expand and deepen despite those incidents.
You just mentioned about South China Sea, and there are other questions that I try to come with, and many questions on like Vietnam and Philippines relations. Like many countries of ASEAN has territorial dispute with China. So how does South China Sea impact the whole ASEAN or the region? How important is it? How does it project? How China is projected or perceived in the region? Because of
after for so many decades, some people may characterize the South China Sea dispute as in a deadlock situation. The truth is that we can't move forward without China agree to the terms and the COC negotiation as well. So there is a rumored single draft COC in existence, and we hope that would be the stepping stone to what will become of a multilateral bilateral agreement between China and the claimant and non-claimant states in the South China Sea to come to terms on how can we respect each other without increase the tension in terms of navigation, oil and gas exploration, joint development areas. So many things are being discussed at the same time. So bilaterally, multilaterally, we work on them simultaneously.
Let me come back to it. There's another question. That's why I'm trying to bring it together. And we're running out of time. We hardly have 5 to 7 minutes. So what is stopping the ASEAN countries from coming up with an ASEAN minus X formula to work out a legally binding code of conduct in ASEAN that can better address China's aggression in the region?
Yeah, because there is more than one minus X. So only 5 claimant states. So the other 5 are non-claimant. Indonesia, even though it is not a claimant state in South China Sea dispute, but its waters, the North Natuna Sea especially, the disputed fishing ground very close to Vietnam, Malaysia, and China. So I think there is a need to have a kind of a mini-lateralism that is according to the fishing dispute area. So they were the site on the western South China Sea and the eastern South China Sea. So I think in that way, because it also involved the oil and gas exploration as well, which is quite a sensitive area of energy security negotiation. So again, bilateral, minilateral, and multilateral has to be explored all at the same time to try to achieve the maximum outcome for everyone involved.
Thank you so much. I think we can take maximum 1 or 2 more questions because we have to wrap up. But since let me take 2 or 3. Like there is one in the chat box by Hafiz Hassan. He says that, as we know, there are quite a number of challenges ASEAN nations facing, like Myanmar issues, territorial claims, on top of the economic recovery due to pandemic. Will that impede ASEAN's resilience in facing the great power rivalries?
Oh, yes, indeed, because there are too many issues that coming at once. So what we need right now is to prioritization. Seems like the individual governments prioritize the public health infrastructure resilience rather than, and then followed by economy. So the other areas such as international dispute, bilateral or multilateral would have to be wait until the internal situation be stabilized before the government can tackle the greater questions.
Let me go to the last question for today. There has been debate within the Malaysian academics and think tanks community over the country's response and its approach to South China Sea more broadly, with some advocating a more conciliatory stance towards China in the interest of closer bilateral relations, and other advancing a nationalist enough is enough argument that calls for deeper cooperation with the United States in order to stand up against China's aggression. The majority of voices, however, continue to support a cautious approach, wary of making an irreversible strategic misstep. What is your view on this?
This sounds like the person has read the writing by Professor Quick Cheng-Chui, so appreciate applaud. So there is variations in Southeast Asia's responses towards the great power, whether this great power is US or China or Australia for that matter. So I think some countries have very different conditions, such as the Chinese diaspora in the country that become a domestic political sensitivity. And the local Chinese Chamber of Commerce and also business interests also sometimes play a role or not play a role at all in attracting investment from China. So in terms of the 5G technology adoption, for instance, it was so sensitive that when Malaysia under Mahathir decided to adopt Huawei 5G, we received a lot of pressure from United States to drop that adoption. And indeed, we actually changed to another 5G technology, not because of US pressure, but because of the domestic political coalition change. So again, I think there is a lot of domestic dynamics that we need to look into rather than just on the structural level. Thank you so much for the questions.
Dr. Chiew-Ping, thank you so much for the interesting lecture. We learned a lot, and I'm sure our participants also benefited immensely from it. We are really grateful for your time, and we hope to see you in real, maybe in Kathmandu or in Malaysia or elsewhere. We'd also like to thank our audience for their wonderful questions. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you.